Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to our Ask Me Anything session this evening for coding interview tips and portfolio review event. This evening, our guest speaker is Cecelia Martinez. Give me 1 second here. My name is Jennifer Ponder. I am located in Atlanta, Georgia. I am actually the Senior Front End Leadership Fellow for the Front End track. And Cecelia Martinez, she is a success engineer at Cypress IO, and also she is a front-end track evangelist volunteer with the track. Now we're going to move into our Women Who Code mission, which is to inspire women to excel in technology careers. Our vision is a world where women are representative as technical executives, founders, VCs, board members, and software engineers. Also, please take a look at our code of conduct. We definitely want this community to be a collaborative space where everyone feels included and also supported. If there is something that you are not seeing or something that you are seeing that may be an incident, please report it to us. We do have that on our womenwhocode.com website. And also you can look at further information on the code of conduct from there. Also, for Women Who Code front-end information, so if you are currently a member, welcome to the event this evening. And also, if you're new to the track and you want to learn more about us, welcome. Thank you so much for attending the event this evening. You can join to become a member at womenwhocode.com front end, of course. Also, if you'd like to email us any type of event that you'd like to see coming to the track, or even just to be a speaker for any event coming up, front end at womenwhocode.com. You can definitely email us. Our Twitter is WWCode front end, and also our Instagram, you can find us at WWCode front end 1, and we do have Slack. So if you notice on our Twitter, we usually like to keep our Twitter link pinned to the top of Twitter and also within our link tree on Instagram. So if you're having issues and you can't get in, definitely send us over an email. We definitely want to get you into our Slack community and also a part of the group. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Cecelia.
All right, great. Can y'all hear me okay? If anybody can't hear me, feel free to pop that in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat the entire time, so feel free to throw any questions in there. And then as well, you can also use the Q&A function or the hand raise function. Great.
They said awesome. They can hear you.
Perfect. Yes, so I have two screens going, so I should be able to keep an eye on everything while I have this shared here. So give me 1 second. Let me just make sure. So all looks good. Okay, and y'all can see my screen okay? It's a slide, little cartoon version of me.
Yep, it looks good.
Okay, perfect. Great. Yeah, so my name is Cecelia Martinez. I am a success engineer at a company called Cypress. It is a company based out of Atlanta. We are a end-to-end testing framework for anything that runs in a browser. So if you have any questions on that, feel free to feel free to send me drop a question in the chat or anything like that. But I've been there since January. Before that, I was a junior software developer at a company called Fusionetics, working with C# and .NET and AngularJS. I am a graduate of Georgia Tech Boot Camp. So I graduated in July of this past year, and I started working at Fusionetics just about a week after graduation, and then moved to Cypress in January. I like to volunteer in the Atlanta community and Atlanta tech community. I'm on the leadership team. I was a founding member of Out in Tech Atlanta for the LGBTQIA+ community in tech. And I'm also, as Jennifer said, a Women Who Code front-end track ambassador. Please feel free to connect with me. I really enjoy talking to people about their journey into getting into tech and their careers and advance it, especially for people who are underrepresented in the tech industry. So, please feel free to follow me on Twitter, on GitHub, or feel free to also reach out to me in the Slack for Women Who Code. So what I'd like to do, and it's nice because we don't have too big of a group where it would be difficult to do some of these different kind of coding questions and portfolio reviews, is I'd like to start by going through a couple of slides of resources that were helpful for me when I was kind of going through my interview process and my bootcamp process. If you do have a portfolio that you'd like to review or to have us review kind of in this session or even privately, you can go ahead and send me a message or via Zoom chat. You can send it to the panelists with the link to your portfolio, and then just indicate whether you'd like me to like go over it here in the webinar, or whether you'd like me to review it privately and then reach out to you via email or via Twitter, or just kind of put in the message how you'd like me to get that feedback for you. So just to kind of get an idea too of who we have here, if anybody is looking for their first opportunity in tech, if you could raise your hand, if you could use the hand raise function, or you can also pop it in the chat if you're kind of looking for your very first position. Okay, great. Yes, okay, perfect. Yeah, you can also feel free to send over resumes as well. That's a really great question. So resume or portfolio, you can send me the link via chat, and then like I said, just kind of put how you'd prefer to have that reviewed. Okay, so it looks like a good amount of people here are looking for their first position. So that's great. That's kind of who this is geared towards. So, and then how many are looking for specifically for web development and JavaScript development? Okay. Awesome. Yeah, so quite a few too. So excellent. So I'm primarily a JavaScript developer. Like I said, I do also have experience with C#. So I can speak a little bit to that as well, but most of this is going to be around JavaScript. So hopefully that's helpful for you. Yeah, so if you do, I can also, my CeceliaCreates.com, and then Cecelia Creates is my Twitter handle. If you aren't able to send it in chat, then you can send it to me there as a file. You can also reach me. I can pop this here. It's CeceliaCreates@gmail.com. So kind of the same thing as everything else. I have very consistent branding if I can help it. So great. All right. So I'll wait to get some of the messages in to see if anybody would like to get their portfolio or self-reviewed, and then I'm going to go over some resources here, and then we can hop into some questions. Okay. So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about what some of the foundational skills and how to kind of learn them as you're getting into tech, and talking about establishing a new way of thinking about code. So if you're new to web development, if you're new to programming, if you're new to code, which I'm a career switcher. So I used to work in journalism and then finance, and now I'm a software developer. So understanding how code works, it's like a little bit like learning a new language. And when you do that, you kind of have to have a very specific mental model that works for you. So in my case, when I was learning about functions and classes and inheritance and prototypes, a lot of times coming at it from different angles. So if you have a computer science background, you may come at it from a math perspective. I have a language and kind of communications background and writing background. So for me, approaching it kind of like learning a new language, a new foreign language, or a new spoken language worked a little bit better for me. But you kind of want to think about how you learn and what's the best way for you to illustrate some of these concepts. So for me, I like to draw a lot of pictures. I like to have whiteboards. I like to work through them that way. And so it may be that the first way that you try to learn something, it doesn't work for you, because maybe watching a video isn't the best way for you. Maybe you're more hands-on. Maybe reading a book is tough, but if you have a visual aid, then that's a lot easier for you. Maybe it's better to have somebody actually explain things to you out loud. So understanding how you learn is a really important skill to have, not only for getting into tech, but then once you are a programmer, you are going to have to continue learning throughout your entire career. So understanding how you learn is like a very important first step, right? And kind of, especially once you know how you learn, then when you start to get into some of the more complex things like data algorithms or design patterns and things of that nature, if you know how you learn, you can approach them the right way from the beginning, so you don't confuse yourself. Because I've done that before a lot. I know everybody talks about this in JavaScript, the keyword this, and it was just one of those things that I just did not get for the longest time. Same thing with the reduce method. I really prided myself on trying to learn all the array methods, and reduce just killed me, and it took me forever and ever and ever until finally somebody explained it to me a slightly different way, and it clicked. So I think it's important to understand that just because you can't learn something right away the first time, that doesn't mean that you can't learn it at all. It just means that you need to find the best way to learn it. So I actually did this kind of questionnaire. It's called BARC, and I found out that I'm a multimodal learner. So I like things like graphs, diagrams. You know, I do a lot of handwritten notes, and I like to draw things out. So I need to learn in a lot of different ways. So I think if you can kind of do something like this, or if you talk to, you know, teachers that you have or mentors that you had and kind of figure out what your best way to learn is, then you can actually leverage the community resources and ask for resources that fit your specific learning style. Okay, and I also just wanted to share some of these resources that so kind of across the different methods of learning. So if you like books, I like to read to get the fundamentals, but then I definitely need to see it in action. For me, JavaScript, The Good Parts was probably the best book on this list. However, it's a little bit outdated now. But if you're kind of want a good fundamental overview of like the kind of the basics, it's great at explaining that, I thought. Videos, Pluralsight, this is a little bit of an old slide, but I had a Pluralsight membership when I was learning all C# because I went from my boot camp learning JavaScript and had to learn C# for my first job, and Pluralsight was really helpful there. If you like tutorials, you know, like where you actually get to type stuff out, Flatiron has a free pre-bootcamp prep course that is absolutely great. It goes through, you know, all of JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and then also Ruby and Rails. And it's completely free, and it comes with coaches and everything. And then I just put a couple podcasts on here that I like, and this is kind of more for the human aspect of getting into tech, talking about being a tech junior, and then also if you come from underrepresented groups, a lot of these podcasts are geared towards that as well. So, all right, I do want to leave a bunch of time for questions, and it looks like we have a couple already. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over there. If anybody has a question, I'm going to go ahead and put all the hands down if I can. Okay, so Keisha, did you have a question, or is your hand raised just from the tests earlier? Okay, and what about Doreen? Did you have a question? No, okay, great. Okay, so first question we have here. I finished my full stack development in Berkeley Bootcamp in March and applied 50 to 75 jobs. I applied through LinkedIn and Indeed as a junior web developer, and everyone replied as not a perfect fit for the job. Yeah, so this is really tough. I actually applied on LinkedIn I applied to 130 jobs over the last month of my boot camp, and I got one interview out of those, just from like blanket applying with my resume and my portfolio. Every single interview that I got was either through networking, leveraging local networks, or it was something where I actually, when I applied for the job, I did my research and found something about the company or somebody at the company that I could leverage in some way. So yeah, so I definitely feel you. Applying to all the jobs on LinkedIn and Indeed was really tough. It's really tough on your self-esteem. I mean, nobody likes to get rejected, especially over 100 times. You know, I had hoped that going into my boot camp that I would have a little bit better of prospects with the job search because I have an undergraduate degree and I have previous job experience. But yeah, so I definitely had to do a lot of extra work. And for me, that looked like networking. It won't look like networking for everybody. I like to talk. I'm a people person. That's what works well for me. But I would say the important thing is you need to find something that sets you apart, whether that be if you have a very specific framework that you like or a skill, whether that's like if you know how to do testing really well, or if you know a certain platform for deploying your site. So if you like end up learning Netlify really well or AWS, you can also set yourself apart in other ways, right? So if you are a career switcher like me, you can leverage your background experience from the other jobs that you've had. You can also leverage, you know, things like community. So I did a lot of volunteer work and I volunteered at conferences and I was able to meet a lot of people that way. You can contribute to OSS, and I'm happy to talk about that as well, since Cypress, the company that I work for, is an open source software. And so essentially what it is, though, is that you need to find something that is going to set you apart from the other applications, because there's a lot of people vying for these junior developer positions, right? And a lot of them have similar skill sets in that they have a very broad understanding because they've gone to a boot camp or they're self-taught and they've, learned a lot of the basics and they are able to do quite a bit, but it's a lot of the same overlapping skill sets. So if you could find anything in particular to set you apart, and then also have, if it's something in particular that you're passionate about that you can speak to, when you go in for an interview, when you get to that stage, especially at the junior level, it's going to be, what I have found is that when people are interviewing, they're really learning to see how can you communicate about what you know? Can you learn quickly? And are you passionate and curious naturally, as in like you will be self-motivated to continue to teach yourself and learn. So if you can find ways to portray those skills and have that come across when you're talking to anybody, I find that a lot of people who have recently graduated or who are looking for jobs say things like, oh, like I'll take anything, front end, back end, whatever. I just want to get in there and start doing something or learn, and I'm happy to do whatever. I find that approach hasn't worked as well than having a very specific saying, like if you can say like, I love CSS, I love design, I love front end, I have a great portfolio that demonstrates that, then that is something very specific that you can tack onto and talk about, and that sets you apart. So I would really kind of spend some time doing a little bit of soul searching and thinking about how you're framing your skills, because chances are you've done the work, you have the skills, it's just presenting yourself in the best way that you can set yourself apart. So I hope that's helpful. The other thing I do want to say is that it is very tough. Like, it's not an easy process to go through. I was very stressed out. I had quit my job. I was unemployed, was doing the boot camp, and having a very strong support system for me was incredibly helpful. Like, I look back at my Facebook posts and my Twitter posts from that time, and there were some days where I'm like, I'm not going to make it. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is way too hard. And it's something that's just like, having a good support system is really important. And for me, I leverage the local community a lot. Like I said, I'm a member of Women Who Code Atlanta, Women Who Code Front End. I also am a member of Out in Tech, for LGBTQ. And I also, really use like my boot camps, study groups, and leverage a lot of those resources to just kind of have like my own cheerleaders to keep me going. So I would say that's definitely an important thing. And yeah, if you have resumes and you're not able to send them to the chat, you can mail it to ceciliacreates@gmail.com, the email address that I put in there. So, okay. Do we have any other questions right now? And again, you can either raise your hand, drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm happy to kind of keep going through some resources and talking about maybe some more specific concepts. If there's any specific concepts in JavaScript or about interviews that you'd like to discuss, I'm happy to talk to those.
Cecelia, I'm just going to break in for a bit and just say, can you go over, because I know a lot of times when folks are starting out, algorithms, anything they need to be practicing as far as HackerRank, LeetCode, anything like that, because I think algorithms tend to trip people up. So if you can speak to that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I did quite a bit of like the exact examples that you said. So I mentioned earlier about learning the different types of methods, especially for front-end development. If you are looking more specifically for front-end, learning the different types of objects in JavaScript. So like, we know the difference between an array, an object, a string, the different types, understanding what the different methods are on those. So what's a string method versus what's an array method? What are some of the return values that you get from those methods, and how can they be leveraged? Understanding what things are truthy, which things are falsy. Those are some of the types of questions that you'll see on interviews. And then also things around design patterns. So I've been asked things like, if for example, for SQL, if you are getting any kind of database questions, I've been asked, if you had a group of students and a group of classes and you needed to query which students were in which classes, what would that look like? And they have you talk through in pseudocode. I have seen a lot of people that I've talked to that there's less whiteboarding that I've heard of. I mean, it still exists, but it's more, I've seen an increase in actually like live coding sessions or pairing with an existing employee. And then also kind of a pseudocode or talking through the solution more so than actually coding for some of the technical challenges. Another format that I've seen a lot too is actually just people sharing a project. So they'll ask, like 2 of the interviews that I had, they had me come in and bring a project and share it, and they wanted me to talk through it, and they asked me questions about it. And really that was a way just to kind of check and understand my knowledge around like making sure that I had actually coded it and understood how it worked. So I do want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you would want to learn. Oops, sorry. Let me just kind of get through here. Yeah, so some real world functionality, sorry, of how front end works as well. So one of the interviews that I went on, I would say, well, it wasn't the best structured interview, but they had me like on a whiteboard talk about how to, you know, how different selectors worked in CSS. And if I wanted to write an event handler for a button that submitted something, what would that look like? And things like that. So I've also did another interview where they showed me a website of what it should look like. And then in CodePen, they had it a different version of it that was broken in certain places, and they wanted me to fix it based on the original. So I think a lot of times when you're going for developers, what they really want to know is like, can you do the job? And so understanding the real world functionality beyond just this is what a function is, this is what a method is, these are what some of like the LeetCode things are. That's helpful to help you get to really understand those fundamentals. But then being able to apply those things in real life is going to be really helpful when you actually go to the interview. So understanding, you know, what things are. So like on this slide, this architecture, things like MVC and components. So MVC is model view controller, different ways of structuring code bases and what that looks like. Authentication is a really big one. I've seen a lot of people request projects or apps that have a login component, even if it is a front-end app, whether it's using a microservice or some kind of plugin. Accessibility and web performance, these are huge topics. DOM manipulation, that's a very fundamental core concept in web development and front end. And so really understanding how that works, especially if you're using a framework like React, where things are rendering constantly, that's a really important concept to nail down, because I've had very specific questions about how we're accessing different parts of the DOM works. You know, DOM traversal, things of that nature. Event handling, again, a very core component of JavaScript is how you handle events, right? It's being reactive, being dynamic. Data management and security. So especially if you have more, as more and more front-end apps become more complex, understanding that some of the back-end things that used to exist in the server are now shifting towards the front end, and you're handling more data and more state management in the front end. Understanding what that looks like, what some of the different tools are. And then error handling, right? Some good best practices around error handling, around avoiding things like memory leaks. And then also like going back to performance, those are some really core concepts that are how web actually works in the real world, like web development works in the real world. I did do a lot of the Kana, I forgot what is actually what it's called, at first. And I will say that don't get too caught up in making your answers look like really short and beautiful, because when I first started, mine were like 30 lines long with a bunch of chained if or else statements. And in actuality, what I found is that it's way more readable to do it that way, rather than having like 3 nested ternaries and, you know, a bunch of arrow functions and things like that. It's okay if you need to have it spelled out the long way in order to really understand it, because all you're really doing is you're teaching yourself. So you want to learn in the best way for you. So as this question here, what are your thoughts on internships? So I will say that I think internships can be a great opportunity. I would say make sure that you're always getting something out of it for yourself, especially if it's an unpaid internship. I've had some friends who've done unpaid internships or worked for equity at very, very early stage startups in order to get experience, in order to build their portfolio, and in order to be able to say that they worked on an actual like in production application, and also to get you know, a title, right? To be able to say like software engineer intern, or that you worked at a company. So I would just say like make sure that you're taking opportunities that are going to be beneficial to you and not just the company. 99.9% of the time, I would say any internship that you take should be paid. I think it's a great opportunity to learn. A lot of times you can translate that into a full-time job in different types of programs. The problem with a lot of internships is that, I shouldn't say a problem. But a lot of them do require sometimes for you to be a full-time student already, right, to be in college. And so if that's not the case for you, then it can be a little bit harder to find those internship opportunities. I have seen a rise in apprentice programs. This dot, they have an apprentice program. I've seen a couple other ones as well, where it's like an internship, but it's not specifically for college students. It's made for people of all different backgrounds and skill levels, and for a way to kind of get experience while also getting paid. And then I'm in a boot camp now. What would you do differently or focus more or less on in boot camp? This is a great question. I get asked a lot about boot camps, especially since I got a job right after I graduated from mine. I will say that I talked to a lot of people about boot camp before I started. It was a really big investment for me. And so I really did my research and my homework. And I will be forever grateful to Valerie Regis, she's from Atlanta, but she does a lot of speaking and different things. She's really great. She's DevOps. She's like a DevOps person. But she also went to the Georgia Tech boot camp that I went to. And she told me, learn Git. She's like, if you don't do anything else, just please learn Git. Like, start now, because it's hard and it's confusing and it's not intuitive at all. And I will forever be grateful to her for that, because Git was really hard for me, and it was something that just felt totally foreign and different. So I would definitely say things kind of like on this list, right? Things that are beyond the kind of school world and like how apps actually function in the real world. I would say I did a lot of the projects in class, but then I also did a lot of side projects as well. And I think that was really helpful because, again, it shows a willingness to kind of go above and beyond, and a curiosity and wanting to learn. I will say too, for my boot camp, I knew pretty much right off the bat that I was going to have to work extra hard in the job search, maybe more so than I initially expected once I actually got in there. So I will say I did already know HTML and CSS. I've known that since I was like in high school, you know, like Neopets and LiveJournal and all that stuff. But everything else to me was pretty new. I knew like a tiny bit of JavaScript and jQuery from knowing WordPress. But so I will say that being able to kind of set myself apart with the other skills that I had was really helpful. And then I spent, I spent at least 10 hours a week. I would say like 5 to 10 hours a week on outside like projects, networking, going to meetups, writing blog posts, tweeting, in order to kind of get my name out there enough to be able to find like those opportunities. So I will say that, yeah, those are kind of the main things, is that you really want to keep track of what you learn, keep an engineer's notebook, something of that nature. You kind of need to do more than just the boot camp, which I know sounds awful because the boot camp is a ton. So if you need to take, a lot of the people that I went to school with graduated and then spent like 2 to 3 months continuing to learn and to work and to do their job search, right? I was in a position where I had to have a job as soon as I graduated, whether it be as an engineer or as a work in retail. So I was put extra time into the job search and really overloaded myself in those 3 months, maybe more so than some of my classmates did. So I'd say you kind of need to give yourself time and knowing how you work and knowing how you operate. And then Git, please just learn Git. It's so complicated. I'm doing a master's, but couldn't get a summer internship. What should I concentrate on while applying for companies? Awesome. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that you can do, right, that aren't necessarily formal things. You can be working on side projects. I would definitely do that. There's a lot of volunteer opportunities and open source as well. If you can get some different a group of people together and there's a Code for America is a group. I'm sure there's also a global version of it as well. But essentially they do open source projects for civic hacking is what they call it, essentially for like public projects and nonprofit projects and different things like that. And then right now, all of the conferences and everything are online. So there's a lot, and they're free because they're online. So there's a lot of great resources and opportunities now to be able to do things, like webinars and learning sessions. And, you can get, if you are able to do any kind of specific course on or licensing around like a specific platform. So if you want to understand like AWS or Netlify or DevOps or something like that to set yourself apart, doing like a special course or a tutorial and learning an additional skill. And not only does it build out your skill set, but it shows that you're a lifelong learner. right? So if you can go and say, oh, you know, I didn't get a summer internship, but I spent the entire summer teaching myself this and working on these projects, then that sets apart that you are really self-motivated and driven to do it yourself, which is what a dev team would love to see, right? Because they don't want to necessarily have to like guide you throughout the entire process. That's not to say they shouldn't. There should be some really good resources in place for junior devs. But if you can show that you're self-motivated in that way, it's really helpful. All right. Awesome. Any questions, any other questions about anything, or any portfolio review requests? Okay. Yes. Okay, Brianna, great question. Yeah, so I would say for mid, yes, mid, yeah, definitely mid, I would say. I would say go for it, honestly. React, I mean, React is kind of one of those things where it's changing so fast that I feel like your most recent work is more important necessarily than how long you've been doing it. So if you have about 1.5 years of experience, but that was all on like really good production work, if you were, you know, and you have a lot that you can show for it, then, and if you're able to demonstrate like a strong understanding of React and also like state management and some more of those advanced topics, then absolutely. I would say in general, just go for it, especially if you're able to get to the point where you're not putting like all your eggs in one basket emotionally with jobs, and that can be tough. Like I've done that before. I saw something and I was like, oh, that would be so awesome, and I apply for it and I'm like, you know, super excited. But it's so I would say like, yeah, I would say go for it with the understanding that, you know, every opportunity is just like a chance for you to continue to develop your skills and your interview skills and your cover letter skills and everything like that, and just treat it as like a learning opportunity. But I would say with React, the majority of the time they care about what you do and not how long you've been doing it. I mean, I've had friends who did not have that much React experience at all, and they got hired pretty quickly just because they needed people to get in there and do stuff. So. Okay. Okay. Looks like CeceliaCreates@gmail.com. Yep, that's my email address. I'm not sure why it wouldn't be going through. Sorry about that. If you want to ping me in Slack, I might be able to send it there as well. But yeah, make sure and I do spell my name Cecelia, so maybe it was yeah. Okay, and then perfect. Yes, I will. Any resume that gets sent to me, I'll go ahead and just respond with my kind of like feedback and critique. I used to work at actually in college. I worked in our resume, like our career center, doing this. So hopefully it can be helpful for you. What do you like about being a working developer? What don't you like? Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think it's very specific to the company that you're at. The last company that I was at, like I said, it was working on a legacy code base, but then also developing a new React Native app at the same time. So it was really, I loved working on the React Native app, did not love working on the legacy code base as much. So it just kind of depends, I think, on the tech stack that you're working with and the type of work that you get to do, just like any other job. I love solving problems. Because like I love that kind of just like jolt of energy that you get when it finally goes through. So I think you kind of have to be a little bit built like that, where you can just like bash your head against the wall for forever and not get it, and then when you finally do, it's all worth it. So I really thrive on that energy, and I think that's why. And I love learning. You know, that's something where every single day I learn 20 million new things, and that's really exciting for me. I always tended to get bored at other jobs that I had after a while. So the thing that I would say that I don't like as much, or a bit more of challenges for me, is that sometimes it's hard when you don't know what you don't know, right? So it's just something that kind of comes with more experience. Is sometimes I'll do something and not even realize that it's not the best approach or different things, and those are things that you just kind of learn along the way. And it's just kind of important to keep reminding yourself that sometimes when you're coming up against things that you don't quite understand or that you didn't realize wasn't a best practice and things like that. And then the other thing is also there is a lot of frustration sometimes, and again, you kind of have to think about and it depends on the type of job that you're at too. I work at a startup, right? Cypress is a open source, and then we also have a SaaS dashboard startup product as well. So it's very fast paced. You know, a lot going on all the time, a lot of things that are changing. We're pushing out new features all the time. So, and I'm a success engineer as well. So I also kind of work on that side. And so it's, yeah, it's definitely something that requires a lot of passion, I would say, for this type of job. The job that I had before, I would say was a lot slower paced because it was legacy code based. So it was more about bug fixes and like short, smaller incremental improvements. It was a much longer release schedule. So I would think about those things too when you're applying for a job. And if you can verbalize some of those things, so if you can kind of go to a company and say, you know, I love the idea of working on a small, fast-paced startup type team where I get to work with the newest tech and make big decisions, that's a much stronger message than just, yeah, I don't know, I like to code, right? You know what I mean? So if you can kind of, or if you say, you know, I really like digging into concepts and like being able to take my time with learning things and being methodical in my approach, then maybe something where you were working on a legacy code base and the slower release schedule, or maybe working something like more with like data science, where you're doing more like modeling, you know, but again, being able to kind of pinpoint that and speak to it is what's helpful. And honestly, I love my job. It was like I said, it was a big life decision. It was a big investment for me to switch careers, and it's something that like I probably wouldn't have done at any other point in my life. I kind of needed to like be right where I was to do that, and I'm so glad that I did, because not only has it been a quality of life improvement, obviously, you know, but also just the flexibility, the like the security, you know, being able to like just feel comfortable in my position. I mean, like the tech industry has been a lot more resilient with coronavirus and everything going on, and so I just feel very grateful for all the support and the opportunities that I've had along the way. And yeah, so I would say it was definitely worth it, but it's a lot of work. Yeah. Excuse me. Okay. Yeah, so those are all really great questions. Thank you all so much for your participation. A couple of other tips that I kind of have about when you're learning how to code and learning to be a developer. So read real code every day. This is kind of something that when you're working on your own projects and working on your own code, it's important that you also are looking at, you know, professional production level code and different types of examples. And that can even be things like, if you're not quite at that, if like a code base on GitHub is really overwhelming, which I totally get that, then it can be things like the small examples that you do on like LeetCode and HackerRank and Conic. I can't remember what it's called, the one that I used to do, but it's at least so you're working on it every single day and you're seeing different examples. It's the same thing that when if you're learning a language, like if you're learning Spanish or Mandarin or something, you know, you want to get a little bit of it every single day and make sure that you're always kind of in that frame of mind. Talking about some ways that you can get practice in projects that you can work on. You can clone or fork repos on GitHub and make changes, not even necessarily with the plans to make a contribution, but just for the practice, right? Just like pulling down something like a project maybe that somebody else in your bootcamp did, or maybe something else that you find from one of the projects on our front-end Women Who Code front-end Slack, and then saying, you know, I'm going to try and just restyle it, right? If you want to practice your CSS, or maybe I'm going to change the color scheme, or maybe I'm going to take it and I'm going to transfer it over to Flexbox or to Grid and just practice that. You can also add new features to old projects. So one of the things that I did before my bootcamp, I was trying to practice JavaScript. So I made a budget calculator using like Bootstrap and some very simple jQuery. And, you know, you just typed in your budget and then it told you how much you needed to like save each month, kind of a thing. So what I did after my bootcamp is I remade that calculator, but using React. So essentially kind of just refactored it. Refactoring is another great way to practice your code, you know, taking old projects or even just like finding beginner projects online. And if you want to, you know, try converting it to ES6 or going through and saying, you know, can I componentize this, or can I add error handling? Practicing those real world functionalities, or saying, you know, can I add a better login functionality. Watch other devs work. I used to do this a lot more, but I haven't done it in a while since I got my new job, but live streaming, I will say there's a Taylor Alexis on Twitter. She does live coding of Python exercises, working on Python all day. I bet like a lot. So there's a lot of other streamers as well on Twitch and on YouTube that will do different coding exercises. If that's a good way for you to learn. Also, pair programming. If you can like hop on Zoom with somebody and share screens and do some pair programming. Inspect sites you like and document how they work. So I got this tip actually when I was in boot camp. I had one of my, classmates was amazing with CSS, like the best. And I asked, how did you learn this? And he said that he would just, right click on websites and view source and just read all the code and just start pulling things and playing around with it and figuring out. So if you ever come across a design that you just love, just take a look at the, inspect it in DevTools and see how they did it and try and see if you can recreate it yourself. And then also keeping an engineering notebook. So this is what I kind of talked about earlier. And actually, let me see. There is a website called Notion that I use a lot. So let me see, Notion templates. And it's free. It's kind of like Evernote if you ever use that, but there's a lot of different templates that you can use. And one of them is there's a job search, like a job applications template, which will let you kind of keep track of where you've applied, what your resume files are. So I use Notion for pretty much like planning my entire life, and I love the templates and everything. So I would recommend checking some of these out. There's a lot for studying, keeping track of different things, but I use Notion to keep my engineer notebook when I was in my boot camp and keep track of what I was learning, the things that I had kind of learned throughout I kept this process going through my first job, keeping notes of what I had worked on that day, breaking out the code base and making notes to remind myself, what I did. And so those were kind of things that I definitely would recommend doing, not only while you're learning, but then also into your career as well. And then, does anyone have any questions on kind of some more of these like complex things like dev tools or processes? I'm not sure if anybody here is interested in DevOps specifically. You could raise your hand if you are. I can talk a little bit more about like DevOps or testing as well. Okay. All right. So an engineering notebook, that's a good question. So it's kind of, that's how I describe it. What I do for it is every single day that I coded, which in the boot camp was every day, I would essentially have a document. I started off with a Google Doc, and then I moved it into Notion to become better organized, where I would write down what I worked on that day, and it could say like topics. So it would just be like functions or inheritance or array methods or whatever the topic was. And then I would also write down anything that confused me, like anything that I just I read about it, but I didn't get it. And then also if any kind of aha moments that I had where I read something or I saw something written out or I was like, okay, like this is great. And that kind of does two things for me. Number one, it helps me commit it to memory. Typing something, I'm a kinetic learner as well. So writing or typing something helps help it stick in my brain. And then also it gives you a place to refer back to. If you use Notion or Google Doc, it's also searchable, which is nice. So if you can search your notes for man, I know I did research on cookies, like 3 weeks ago, you can search your notes and find it. It's not meant to be for me, it wasn't meant to be a very detailed, every single day class notes. It was more meant to be this is what you accomplished. These are your questions. This is what you learned. And then basically just kind of having that to reference back. It's also helpful too, when you kind of need a little bit of a self-esteem boost when you're I feel like an idiot and I can't think of anything today, to go back and to look at some of the earlier entries and be wow, I really have come a long way. Because I remember back here on this day, CSS specificity was totally beyond me. And now I can tell you how the points add up and everything like that. So it does kind of also help you see your development process as you're learning. And so I would say it can be anything. It can be paper, it can be a Notion, it can be a Google Doc, it can be GitHub issues. I mean, however you want to structure it. But I think keeping track of what you're learning and taking notes is something that's been really helpful for me. Okay. All right. So I do want to say, anybody else who would like to send me their resume, their email, I'm sorry, their resume or their portfolio, please feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to do that. And then also, if you have any questions, but maybe you don't necessarily feel comfortable asking, in a public forum, feel free to email me or send me a chat as well, or I'm sorry, in the Slack. I'm happy to help however I can. I know getting that first job is really, really tough. I ended up getting a job right away, but I did go on a lot of interviews. I had to do a lot of extra work, and it can be like pretty discouraging. But I will say that a lot of my friends I went to boot camp with, like, it took a while, especially in this climate, but they did, a lot of them did find jobs, and they just basically, the only way to really fail is to quit. As long as you keep trying and you keep working on things, your skills are going to improve. You're going to have more and more work to show for yourself. Just as long as you keep working on it and don't give up, then you're going to get better. And eventually you will be at the point where, people are clamoring to hire you. So just like, as long as you just don't give up before you hit that point, and as long as you ask for help and you ask for support, you can definitely get there. So awesome.
And Cecelia, I'm gonna throw in one quick question, and this is what I've seen in the past, and I know I've had a different take on it, but I want to get your take on it. What about developers? They're starting out, right? And they don't get that initial first job, like you said, it takes time, but they go through the route of either working at startups or having internships, but not really, because, a lot of the jobs, they want you to have production experience. Mm-hmm. And, working with the team. And sometimes that may not always be best. I've seen it where some developers, they don't get that production ready experience to at least maybe 2 years in. And they keep getting, job rejections, and trying to find ways. So what would you suggest there too? Because I know we can tell everybody, hey, keep your GitHub updated, do as many projects as you can, volunteer, but after a while, you can't volunteer for long if you have responsibilities and things of that nature. So I just want to get your take and let you talk about that with the audience, because sometimes we may not think about this, and thinking in the space of COVID-19, where we may have some developers who've been out of work for a while. And, this is a time where you should be keeping your GitHub updated, work on projects while you're at home, because, we never know if we're going to get this type of time again. This has really been something very different, but I just want you to speak on that to developers who may be freelance or consulting, and they just haven't hit that mark of working for a large company, or, where they want to be.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point, because it's so true. So I was very, I'm fortunate that I have like a full-time job. However, there's a lot of developers who are able to really get a great income by doing a lot of different things. So I actually know one friend from my boot camp who worked at one of these kind of like super early stage startups where it's for equity only, but he was able to go on as like an engineering manager, so to speak. He was pretty much leading the redevelopment of this website that they had. And because he was kind of willing and able to do that, he did it in his free time. He also had another job that he was working. So I would say like it was probably 3 months of total chaos for him, which not everybody can do. But as a result of that, because he had experience on a production site, a real business, like small business site, he was ultimately able to get a full-time job from that after about 3 months. And so there's a lot of opportunity to code on real websites if you are pretty flexible in where you learn. And I would say you shouldn't have to do it for very long without getting paid. Once you get a couple of really nice looking sites or work that you can point to, then you can definitely start like asking for money and leveraging your network. There's other opportunities that you can take as well. Developing content and teaching is really popular right now. A lot of people are kind of looking for courses and resources to help them. A lot of people do like blog writing and content creation there, but really it's if you want to build a production level site and get it online, there's not a lot stopping you if you really want to do that. I mean, nowadays you can build a React app, you can deploy it to Netlify, and you can use just like a one login or a microservice to get it set up, and then you have a real functioning like real life app. And I think that that's something that seems very daunting, but if you have 3 months to kill anyway, and at the end of it, you can have like a real production quality like app that you worked on, that you developed all those skills in boot camp, then I would say go for it. You know, there's a lot of really great hackathons going on right now. Specifically, there's one in Atlanta where they're scraping Black-owned business websites, the content in order to create better directories so people can support them. And that's something that's open source and people are working on, you know, in their spare time. So I would say the opportunity is definitely out there. And I would say that once you get, you know, a few kind of gigs under your belt, maybe doing something for volunteer, doing something for free, as long as you have a strong portfolio and you present the work well, then yeah, there's no reason why you can't leverage that into, you know, different side gigs and things, or consulting gigs and teaching gigs or different things like that. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We're gonna take just another look at our chat and our Q&A. I think we pretty much covered these questions in the Q&A here.
Yeah, definitely. And I will also give kind of another shout out to if you are learning to pick up an extra skill as a developer or something to set you apart, testing test-driven development is something that is really becoming important. I'm seeing it more and more in job descriptions. People asking, you know, like you have to be able to understand unit tests and end-to-end testing, especially for front end with the end-to-end testing, the integration testing. So if anybody has any questions on testing or wants to learn more about Cypress in particular, you know, feel free. I'm happy to send over some resources. Like I said, it's an open source project. We have a lot of free resources, but that can be also a nice thing to just kind of set yourself apart. Yeah, so, Twitter and social media. So I'm pretty active on Twitter. There's so many great people on Twitter that I like. Taylor Alexis, I mentioned her before. Let me see, I know I had to find, yeah, so Taylor Alexis, I mean, I know that Women Who Code, we retweet a lot of stuff. I retweet a lot of people on there too. It's actually, that's such a good question that I really would love to like get a good list together. I think Valerie Regas, I mentioned her earlier. I mean, there's so many great people in Atlanta. I almost feel like just pulling up my Twitter and seeing. But,
I know it. Definitely, if you're not following Jennifer Bland, Rat Race Grad, definitely follow her.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah, there's so many. I don't know. Yeah, it's yeah. I actually, what I'll do is I'll get a list together and I will put it in. I'll put it in the Slack because I don't want to leave anybody out. There's so many. I love Twitter. I'm a social person. Samantha Ming, she does really great little CSS and JavaScript snippets. Yeah, there's just there's so many. I can't think. It's a tough question, but yeah, and then also on GitHub too. I would say like find people on Twitter, but then follow them through to GitHub, and feel free to fork projects. You know, that it not only, and then I would say too, like even things like creating issues. You know, creating bug reports. Those are all contributions on GitHub. So and it's actually really helpful. Like with Cypress, I actually triage a lot of our issues, and so it's something where it's like, that is actually really helpful when people go in and do that for us or create bug reports or like do those types of things. And all of those count as contributions on your GitHub chart. So like whenever you make an issue or add or create an issue, that kind of helps you. So I would, and that's all because it is work. It's very good work. And documentation is another great place to help out as well. I'm a big fan of open source documentation. So if you're a writer or you have any kind of technical writing experience, that goes a long way. And you shouldn't discount skills like that, like project management or writing, communication. If you ever had to work sales, anything like that, those are really good skills. And you shouldn't you shouldn't discount them or take them for granted because you can still bring a lot to an organization. So awesome. Yeah, so I will definitely get that list together of people to follow. There's and I'll post that in Women Who Code front end, probably just in the generalist channel. Jennifer, if that sounds okay. And
Yep, that's fine. That's fine. Well, if there aren't any more questions, thank you so much, Cecelia, for your presentation this evening. Very helpful and great information. That was phenomenal. Thank you so much. I'm going to share some of our closing updates, what's going to be coming to the track soon, what you can look out for. Just a second here. Okay. Make sure everyone can see that. So far we have, we do a Front End Friday Slack study group every week at 2 p.m. So this week we won't have that just because we have Women Who Code Connect Digital. That's going to be this week, starting on June 5th tomorrow. We will be covering coding topics for our talks. Also, June 12th is the next Friday. We'll have Women Who Code Connect Digital, and we'll have talks over career navigation, salary negotiation, and all types of professional development talks. And also June 19th is when we're going to have our technology for social good talks around community. So this year, Women Who Code, we came up with the digital campaign because, of course, we've had to pivot our offerings just like everyone else, but we want to make sure that we are giving everyone a good offering for all of our programming. So most of the tracks, you've noticed that we have we've activated all of our cross collaboration of events and also promotions there. So most of the networks are online. And also too, the Ask Me Anything sessions, I thought this was a really great session to have, and we want to have more of these events. And definitely we want to try to do this on Slack and also on Twitter. So definitely, if you all enjoyed this event this evening, definitely let us know. We're always trying to look for everything that we can do to try to help and provide resources, definitely. So just want to give a shout out to our sponsors, BCG Digital Ventures and the Home Depot. We're so glad that they sponsored the track over the past year and this year. And also, we just want to thank you all for watching this presentation. Again, you have Cecelia's contact information, and also reach out to us on Slack. Also, Front End at Women Who Code. Definitely email us for a Slack invitation. I noticed some people put some information in our chat here that you want to get into the Slack. You send that over, and we'll definitely send you out an invitation. So definitely thank you all again this evening, and also thank you to you, Cecelia. Great presentation. Thank you so much this evening, and we will see everybody online. Thank you all again for your attention and your time this evening.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciated your participation.
All right. Have a good evening.
Thanks.